hear. Oh, there we go. We wanted them to be able to hear and participate as best they could, not being able to be here live. So I would like to introduce Emily Walensky. She's the chair of the board of Not Dead Yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody. As chairperson of Not Dead Yet, and on behalf of our board of directors, I join you today to honor the life and legacy of our beloved founder, Diane Coleman. Diane was not just a leader in our community, she was a sister, a friend, a lover, and just a badass human being. Diane's mission in her work centered on a vision of a society where every life is valued equally, where the voices of disabled people are not just heard, but respected, and where dignity and justice are non-negotiable. She turned that vision into action when she founded Not Dead Yet in 1996, creating a national disability rights organization that became a powerful force for justice. Through her vision and leadership, Not Dead Yet grew into a powerful force for justice, defending our right to live and ensuring that disabled lives are valued, respected, and protected from discriminatory medical practices, including the non-provision and forced removal of life-sustaining care, quality-adjusted life year measurements, and most of all, the inherently discriminatory public policy of assisted suicide and euthanasia law. Whether in the courts, the halls of Congress, or on the streets during protests, Diane was fierce and tenacious. She challenged systems, she shattered ableist narratives, and she inspired countless others to join the fight. Diane was an intellectual powerhouse, a strategist who could navigate the complexities of policy with unparalleled clarity and conviction. She presented testimony before Congress, authored amicus briefs in critical court cases, and mobilized activists. Her voice was a beacon of truth and justice, cutting through rhetoric with an unyielding commitment to the principles of the disability justice movement. But what truly set Diane apart was her humanity. She was a mentor and a friend and a guiding light to so many of us. Diane's ability to lead was rooted in love for people, for justice, and for the possibilities of a better future for disabled people. She taught us not only how to organize and come together as a community, but always reinforced why we must never stop organizing as a community. One of Diane's greatest gifts was her ability to make people feel seen and heard and valued. Whether mentoring a new activist, rallying a crowd, or strategizing with colleagues, Diane embodied the principles she fought for. She believed in the power of community, the necessity of solidarity, and the strength of bringing communities and coalitions together to rally against oppression. Today, as we mourn her loss, we also celebrate her extraordinary life. Diane's impact extends far beyond Not Dead Yet. It lives on in every person who was touched by her work, every policy she influenced, and every battle towards freedom that she helped us win. Diane taught us to mourn for the dead and fight like hell for the living. And her legacy will guide us as we continue to fight in her name. We extend our deepest condolences to Diane's family, colleagues, and all who loved her. We grieve together, but we also stand united, or sit united, in our commitment to carry forward Diane's work. The movement she built will not falter. We will continue to honor her by striving for the victory she also clearly showed us was possible. Diane, your spirit, your intellect, and your courage will forever be a part of us. You've left us a powerful legacy, and we promise to keep fighting, to keep building, and to keep winning in your name. Rest in power, Diane Coleman. Your light will never dim, and your impact will never fade. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily. It's very beautiful. So first, we'll have Elaine Kolb. She has a song for us today. Elaine, you're with us?
Yeah, I just had to push the button.
Okay.
I am not good with this computer stuff. I'm Elaine Kolb. I'm a fat, old, ruddy white dyke sitting in a six-wheeled power wheelchair, flying a rainbow flag and a Ukrainian flag, wearing an adapt visor and a not dead yet t-shirt. And like many of you, I've known Diane since before she launched Not Dead Yet. And others will say lots of things, and my job is to sing. And I want everybody to know that this song was written in 1980 with the title of Gwen Dixon. Gwen Dixon was a beautiful Black woman with a neuromuscular condition who was a student at Georgia State University, where I was a student also, newly disabled. And Gwen Dixon died. She had muscular dystrophy and she died. The original title of this was Gwen Dixon. And now I have sung it at many different events like this. It doesn't get easier, but it is important to have this message. Here we go. We'll always remember how you smile, how you share your peace and hope and kindness. Now you've left us feeling safe and warm, though the storms of pain and fear surround us, and we knew all along that you'd be leaving, and now at last your spirit will be free. So you've left so many here believing you live on, and your symbol is a living tree. Oh, the seeds of love and life are fragile, and yet they're strong enough to crack the hardest stone. Then they grow and blossom through the seasons, time and time again, and on and on and on and on. The seeds are sown as the years go by. You'll still be with us, shining through the courage that you've shown. Now we'll join in a joyful, growing chorus, saying, well done, sister, well done. Well done, Diane, well done. welcome home. As the years go by, you'll still be with us, shining through the courage that you've shown. And we'll join in a joyful, growling chorus, saying, well done, sister, well done. Well done, Diane, well done. Oh my goodness. Hey, we're not dead yet. Welcome home.
Thanks so much, Elaine. I didn't see that John Kelly came on yet, but we can come back to him. Anita, are you ready to go? We can come back to Anita
Hello.
also. Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Anita Cameron. I am one of the staffers and not dead yet, but kind of more than that. I am a Black trans person with caramel colored skin, very long, kind of gray. I'm on my Not Dead Yet, my pink Not Dead Yet t-shirt with black lettering. And um, I am going to read you what I wrote about Diane so that I could stay on in time. Give me a second. So I first met Diane Coleman in jail. It was on an ADAPT action in Sparks, Nevada in 1989. We were protesting the American Public Transit Association at their convention. And we'd been arrested multiple times. The judge had it with us and sentenced most of us to 3 days in the Washoe County Jail. And the next day, while sitting with others in the tables in the day room, I saw Diane and I shyly introduced myself. I was fairly new and I hadn't met Diane, but I had heard of her. And Diane was the first disabled lawyer I ever met. Diane and I, we began working fairly together when she formed Not Dead Yet in 1996, and she became a mentor and a friend to me. She believed in me, probably way more than I believed in myself. Diane was graceful and wise, could definitely be fierce, definitely. She and I were arrested together many times in ADAPT. Diane had a beautiful voice, and she used to sing at ADAPT Actions, and she actually recorded a couple of songs. And I was honored when she came to Canada and she sang at my wedding. I worked for Diane at Not Dead Yet for almost 8 years. She always told me that she admired my passion and emotion. Diane was always there for me and always encouraging me. I love Diane and I miss her so much. There was a ripple in the force when she departed to join the ancestors. And she leaves a huge, huge legacy. And our losses incalculable. And no one will fill her shoes. But not dead yet. We'll continue on. That is uh, something that I have made that promise. So thank you, everyone. And I apologize if it was personal, you know, because um, Diane and I did have a very close personal relationship in addition to like a week. So Diane, I love you and thank you for believing me and always being there. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anita. When I agreed to do this, I thought I was going to be able to hold it together. Since some of us were able to make it to the funeral, but this is, I think it's just going to be a continued hard day for everybody. And I'm glad we're together. So thank you, everyone, for coming again. Horacio, are you on the call today?
This is Jules. I'm not seeing his name here. We seem to be having an issue where the meeting's not letting more than 100 people in.
Oh,
So I'm trying to fix that. It's supposed to let 500 people in.
okay.
But I also don't see anyone else in the waiting room, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, if Horacio Esperanza comes back on, we'll come back to him. Bob Kafka, I saw you earlier. Would you be open to saying a few words?
Hi, thanks. Next year will be 40 years that Steph and I knew Diane. It was LA when ADAPT was doing its national action, and we met Tom Olin and Diane Coleman. And after LA in 1986, there was another national action in Phoenix, and there was Diane and Tom uh, really just doing what Diane has done all the time, being a pit bull. And, it was really disconcerting to a lot of people because Diane was a very slight person, but she was ferocious, and it's amazing. And there was a picture on Stephanie's desk of Diane Coleman and Babs Johnson actually knitting
Not
the
knitting, sewing.
sewing. I'm sorry, not knitting, sewing. Thank you, Steph. The ADAPT flag has got to know, and it's really poignant, and it showed how she was really at heart a grassroots advocate. And I know Tom Olin will talk about all the various different things they did together. And the one thing that was really always pissed us off back in those days, uh, ADAPT was accused of being all males and totally discounting people like Diane and Stephanie and Babs and Anita and all those others. They just, did leadership and kept moving forward. when Not Dead Yet got involved, created in 1996, we were Not Dead Yet of Texas, and we worked very closely with Diane on our feudal care, where she gave her legal assistance in terms of, language that we tried to get legislation. So she was really so multifaceted, and then it's been alluded to her voice, and she sang uh, Amazing Grace at Wade Blank, one of the founders of ADAPT, at his funeral. And at least for myself, I had never heard her sing. And really, she belted it out like any, jazz singer. So, she'll really be missed, both for what Not Dead Yet did, but also for the grassroots energy that she gave. And I didn't know, Steph, did you want to say something real quick?
Oh, no, yes, you.
Okay, she's kind of emotionally there. So, I know that Diane would want us to celebrate, and then obviously the phrase "don't mourn, organize," and that's what she would want Not Dead Yet to do, to grow and move from state to state, because we're going to be fighting challenges, and she would not want us to go into the fetal position, but to really push back and fight. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about Diane.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Steph. In my interactions with her show, I spoke so highly of both of you. I know you're great friends. And I can't agree more that the best way that we can honor Diane and her memory is to continue the mission and keep up the fight, both for equal human dignity, for disability rights, against assisted suicide laws, and everything that Not Dead Yet stands for and that Diane embodied. So next up, if Carol Sutton is with us. Carol, would you say a few words, please?
I am here. The previous speakers have been so powerful. I hope I can do a little bit of justice here. I am a white appearing, white-haired old woman. And the background I chose is actually a photo that I found of Diane and myself and my friend Sharon Lamp at the Jail Jack campaign. I don't know if y'all can see it. I've got a Jail Jack button of all things. It's
Oh yeah.
kind of old, but it's pretty cool. Diane and I actually met before Not Dead Yet was formed, when she became executive director of the Progress Center, which serves suburban Cook County. I was on the board, and about a year later, we were pretty troubled by what we were hearing out of Michigan, Jack Kevorkian. And I know she went to an ADAPT action, and Bob Kafka, who just spoke, gave us the logo and the name Not Dead Yet. Diane brought that back, and the board unanimously and immediately approved becoming fiscal sponsors for the new organization. My feeling at the time, there was a lady from the next suburb over named Esther Cohen, who hardly anybody ever remembers, but Esther was one of Kevorkian's victims. She was about my age and about my disability level, and had all of the same kinds of challenges that I was facing, but she didn't have much support she wasn't really involved in the SIL. And she apparently said to her sister, well, maybe I should just go see Jack Kevorkian. And her sister said, oh yeah, sure. Instead of saying, oh no, we love you, we want you to stay, we can provide supports. And that Diane and I talked about it, and it's the kind of story that we hear too often. One of the things I loved about Diane was that she could get to the heart of the matter. She taught me that the Better Dead Than Disabled movement was trying to make disabled people the same as terminally ill, and that this is how the law had evolved on this. And she taught so many things. She really got right into the heart of it. And the fact that Esther was from our service area and that she didn't have the support she needed, that she lived in a walk-up but used a wheelchair, all of that just broke our hearts. And that was part of the heart of Not Dead Yet, and it was part of the driving force behind it. The Kevorkian trial and the Jail Jack campaign, which finally turned out successful after he put a snuff film on 60 Minutes. And we sat in the courtroom, we sat outside, we just did whatever. We actually occupied the prosecutor's office for a while because he wasn't going to charge him. It was just getting to know Diane during all of that was one of the most precious things in my life. And Diane and I have been friends ever since. She'll be missed. There's just no two ways about it. She was a towering intellect, insightful, and prophetic in many ways. Diane, we love you. Rest in power. I don't think I can say anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. That was very beautiful and heartfelt, and we appreciate that. Marcia Katz, I saw you earlier. Would you be still open to saying a few words?
Hi. I'm Marcia, now in Montana, formerly in Michigan, and I am also a white appearing woman with white hair and no more glasses though, since I got my cataracts done and I have a purple shirt on. When I think about Diane, there are a number of memories, obviously, that I have. Unlike Tom, who's knew her the best part of her life, but like Tom and Diane, I also hailed from Michigan, so we had that in common. And my husband Bob and I first met Diane, I don't know, about 32 years ago, maybe. And I remember being at the Adapt Action where I was sitting on the floor, and Bob and Diane and my Bob were in their wheelchairs. All we were kind of in our own little circle. And that's sort of where Not Dead Yet got born, and where Bob Kafka picked shared the name of Not Dead Yet. And it was just absolutely perfect, and it was amazing. So literally being there at the birth of Not Dead Yet. And then I looked back in my emails and I was astonished. And these are only the ones going back 15 years, not all the way back to 32 years. But in the last 15 years, we were in touch multiple times a month, at least once a month, but usually multiple times a month. And Diane would be, either we would be sharing information with each other, or Diane would be asking me and Bob to, whether it was Bob being on her board or for us to write letters here and there, both in Michigan and then in Montana when we moved there, and participate in the legislative activities. But I also remember being present at the actions in Michigan where we not only protested what became the Compassion and Choices group in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but then we also went to an ethics committee meeting in Lansing, Michigan, and the legislature there. And some of you who are present here today were at some of those actions. Particularly Eli, I remember you being there early on. At the Ann Arbor action at the One Hotel. And then I think Carol was maybe there as well, and then some of the other folks. And Diane also developed great relationships with Dr. Ira Byock, who has done a lot of work in death and dying. And because of the relationships that she developed, Ira was actually working here in Montana. And so when we moved to Montana, he recruited my husband, Bob, to be on the board of his organization here. And that all came from the relationship that Diane had developed with him during the early years of Not Dead Yet. And if you Google, you'll see different times when the two of them were involved together in a number of things. And like Bob Kafka, I remember the first time too that I heard Diane sing, and I was absolutely gobsmacked that that voice came out of that body. And she was an amazing singer. And I just, would be transfixed, and certainly bought all of her tapes when they came out. We have a lot of the tapes. She was somebody who was fierce and passionate, but she was also measured and strategic and resolute. And I am just, absolutely to this day amazed at not only the organization that she helped nurture over so many years and build, but also how much she knew about what was going on in so many states, because she would be in touch with us in both Michigan and Montana, but I know that she was in touch with multiple other people in multiple other states about the actions that were going on there. In Michigan, we were able to prevent an assisted suicide law from being passed. And so that was, that was early on. That was one of our big successes. And then here in Montana, we haven't gotten a law passed, but we also, Diane helped clarify for people that in Montana, it isn't that assisted suicide is legal, it's that doctors don't face penalties for assisting. And so it's a whole different thing. But also, she and also with Marilyn Golden in part, helped reframe some of this in terms of helping people know that you don't need assisted suicide probably in any state, because there are already laws that allow for people to make choices in their own lives between them and their doctors, etc. So I'm just really honored that I got to know Diane over a lot of years. And I am one of the many people, obviously, that will miss her terribly. And she does leave a big hole in the universe. So thanks.
Thank you, Marcia. Tom Olin, would you say a few words for us?
Sure. Sometimes it's kind of nice to know where you come from and where you've been. Diane and I were teenagers in Michigan when we first met at a rehab hospital. I was an orderly. She was having spinal fusion. And oops, let me see. I was going to start. Okay. And it was a very intense time that she was there. Back then, if you had spinal fusion, you were there for over 6 months, in a rehab hospital. And we kind of drawn to each other because we were both reading Carl Jung and Hermann Hesse at the same time. And so that was like an instant, friendship right there. And we had some really good people there who we stayed in touch with. We had a little community. I had a farm outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I had a Volkswagen Squareback that a gurney could just fit right into the back so perfectly. And so I got to take Diane out on weekends to the farm. But it was, and I say intense because you had people there that just came out of traumatic injuries, our age, and motorcycle accidents and things like that. And some of them wanted to die, some of them wanted to live. It was just like pretty high drama at times. And so I got to spend lunch with her all the time. She would order extra food, and I would spend my lunch with her. we had a lot of friendships that, you know, stayed on and on, you know, through the years. And I like that part of the community and friendship was very something that was always with us, you know. When when I left for Arkansas and she left to go to college, Southern Illinois, she did come down. I went to the Ozarks and lived on a commune, and she came down. She ended up in took a bus, and I got at the bus station about 40 miles away, as closest you could get to where I live. And we hitched back to to the commune. And I mean, pickups that people just, you know, the last one, the person just took us all the way. Really good people, you know, really nice people, but it was in the mountains. It was, you know, one of the most disability unfriendly places to be. But it was also the most beautiful Buffalo River, National Buffalo River area. And what was interesting is that she got to see so much there, in a sense of being able to go places where one of my favorite events that we did, we had a mountaintop field that you couldn't get the track, no mechanical thing could get there, no horse could get there, no mule, only donkeys. That's how we plowed a field of wheat, and it was harvest moon, and so we decided to harvest during harvest moon. And here's Diane in a stretcher. We had 4 people on it going up up the mountain, you know, and that was a little bit easier part. The worst part was coming down, because we also made some homemade beer, and so we had a lot of fun. So I swear, at least one person was always falling down, but the others kept the stretcher straight and all that. But that was really a lot of fun that we had on the commune. Then, you know, we ended up both in California, and I was actually in the Bay Area. She was in the LA area, and we were spending summers together. And then all of a sudden, a group of there's a disability rights group out of California that, or disability rights, just a disability organization, state organization, one of the largest ones, and that's how we got together and met Wade and Mike Allberger, and they just opened their eyes. It was just like, oh my God, you know, this is exactly where we wanted to go. And so we ended up, they were there trying to get people together to go to the LA action, where we'd get to meet Bob and Steph and everybody else in there. But we lived in a small hotel room, motel room, and in Santa Monica, and then moved to LA, to Van Nuys, and we got a van, and this is just pure, you know. We said, okay, you know, let's have the back. We decided to have the lift in the back so we could put in 5 to 7 people in chairs. If you're going to organize, you got to have people, you know, and you got to have transportation, all that stuff, you know. And so we had a really large Southern California ADAPT group. And then the last thing I'll say is how we moved from LA to Tennessee. And that was, we decided to, okay, let's find the worst states that would want and need us. And so we found 3 states, and we found one of the states was Tennessee. And we looked at Tennessee, and it was, oh my God, you know, Atlanta's right there, St. Louis is right there. You know, all these cities are right, you know, really close that we could go and organize. And, you know, and when you look at the map, if you have the railroad maps, all the railroads go right to Nashville. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's how we ended up going. We went to a state that, and they really, you know, we had a great experience with the disability community there. They're waiting for somebody, you know, and we just happened to be there. And Diane was always great on reaching out, and that was also when we got the schoolhouse. Well, last I'll say is, yes, she sang when we had a schoolhouse that had a stage in it. It was an old 4-room schoolhouse, and it was a great venue for Diane to sing. One of her favorite artists was Roseanne. No, oh my God, Linda Ronstadt, and I've gone too long. Okay, thank you for indulging my journey with Diane.
Thank you, Tom. I know you were very close with her and had a lot of amazing times and laid a lot of the foundation for some of the work that others of us do now. So thank you. John Kelly did come on. John, are you ready to say a few words?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. My name is John Kelly. I am a white man lying on my side with blue glasses, receding hair, and I'm looking at Diane's obituary in the New York Times, and I'm going to give you some snippets of it. So here's the beginning. Diane Coleman, a fierce advocate for disability rights who took on Jack Kevorkian, the Right to Die movement at the U.S. healthcare system, which she charged was responsible for devaluing the lives of Americans like her with physical and mental impairments, died on November 1st at her home in Rochester. She was 71. The cause was sepsis. Doctors expected her to die before adulthood. She was valedictorian from her high school. After working as a consumer protection lawyer for a while, she joined a flourishing movement that was pushing for anti-discrimination laws at every level of government. That was ADAPT, considered one of the most militant disability rights groups. She was arrested more than 25 times. In the 1990s, she shifted her attention yet again to assisted suicide and the Right to Die movement. Though the movement was aimed at people with terminal illnesses, she worried that legislation in many states would expand the law to include people with significant disabilities. As Diane said, this is me speaking, everyone eligible for assisted suicide was disabled. And regarding who would lead this movement, which did emerge out of ADAPT, Diane said that it was between her and Carol Gill. Carol Gill, though, was in academia, and Diane felt freer to run the group. The group was called Not Dead Yet, and the way Diane told me was that Bob Kopka came up to her and said, Diane, I think I've got a name for your group. And he said, Not Dead Yet, based on the scene in Mighty Python and the Holy Grail, in which a guy pushing a cart of Black Death bodies was walking along, bring out your dead, bring out your dead. So a younger guy brings out an older guy, and the old guy says, but I'm not dead. So the cart driver clonks him on the head, and that's the end of him. Um, let's see. Working back to the Times, working on a shoestring budget, Ms. Coleman organized protests against right to die legislation, becoming a regular guest on television news programs, and testified 4 times before, before Congress. Quote, it's the ultimate form of discrimination to offer people with disabilities help to die without having offered real options to live. At the core of her critique was the argument that the idea of a quote unquote right to die was evidence of how little society valued people like her and learning, and a warning that the healthcare system was broken. It is already possible in some states for impoverished, disabled, elderly, and chronically ill people to get assistance to die, she told the House Judiciary Committee in 1996. But impossible for them to get shoes, eyeglasses, and tooth repair. This is happening right now in Canada, where you can get euthanized within 90 days, but it could take years to get housing. Not Dead Yet showed up at Princeton University in 1999. I've heard lots of stories about that. After the university hired Peter Singer. Her biggest target was Kevorkian, who became a household name in the 1990s for assisting patients in ending their lives. He would kill them. She sent protesters to his house. I think she went to this protest outside Detroit, and if I recall correctly, that's where she met her husband, Stephen Drake. And she reveled in his conviction for second-degree murder after he killed a guy with ALS on TV. That must have been so awesome. It's the ultimate form of discrimination to offer people with disabilities help to die without having offered real options to live. Diane Marie Coleman was born on August 11, 1953, in Michigan. She was adopted when she developed a disability. The adoption agency said that the parents could send her back like some faulty product. The parents declined. They encouraged her in school and achievement. Anyone who knew her could obviously see how brilliant she was, brilliant, focused, and always determined. In 1989, she moved to Nashville, where she developed plans for an independent living facility for people with disabilities. And then she continued when she moved to Chicago in 1996, the same year she founded Not Dead Yet. She married Stephen Drake, and along with her sister Catherine, survived her, along with another sister. Ms. Coleman and Mr. Drake moved to Rochester in 2008 to be close to his family. By then, the muscles controlling her breathing had begun to weaken, and she was using a ventilator. Still, she remained the chief executive of Not Dead Yet until her death, insisting that her fight was not just for people with disabilities, but for everyone in society. And this is me, because disabled people know that bodies exist on a continuum and all bodies disappoint in the end. Okay, quote, the disability community is the canary in the gold mine, she said to the Village Voice. This assisted suicide euthanasia issue is a test for our nation. If we as disabled, chronically ill, or terminally ill people are declared better off dead, who will be next? Well, we know it will be people, it's been people with eating disorders, psychological conditions, and other psychological or emotional reasons. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate your words. So next up, for the moment, we are Ian McIntosh. Are you with us? And still open to saying a few things?
Yes, Matt.
Great.
Well, I hope everyone can hear me. Connections being what they are. I came to know. I should introduce myself. I'm Ian McIntosh, Director of Disability Outreach for Patients' Rights Action Fund. I'm a white man with glasses, brown hair, blue button-down shirt. My background is blurred. I first came to know Diane through my wife, Anne, in the mid 2000s while my wife was still in law school, but didn't really get to know Diane until the birth of our daughter, Eleanor, in 2018. And then, to my obvious great privilege professionally, beginning in May of 2021, which was the month of the birth of our son, Arthur. And I guess to add what, or to ask, what can be said that already hasn't, but should be repeated as often as we gather to remember Diane from today on. There wasn't a hint of self-importance in Diane. She was a leader par excellence. She was the kind of general you knew would example first and head into the fight and then task second. I think that's rare in any organization or movement. She was kind, attentive, affirming, generous, meticulous, methodical, and above all, I think, as everyone has attested to and will attest, she was gracious. Always made time. Certainly, she possessed that rare skill that could turn 24 hours in a day into 36. And there was an extremely difficult period of time, personally and professionally. As many may know, I'm Canadian, and unbeknownst to me, my own mother had been battling cancer for about a year and a half. And when she came under the ill care of the Canadian healthcare system, and particularly her doctor, and the effects of the medication that were affecting her judgment, she was offered MAID, and for about 12 weeks, um, with the support certainly of my family, of Matt Valier, my boss, and a general not unlike Diane. Diane was there as a constant source of comfort, asking at every opportunity what she might do or how I was feeling. Um, and this spoke to the familiar nature, I think, that Diane instantly imparted upon everybody she met, in which she would make the person, feel as though they were familiar or familial. Certainly within the movement, that she was ever accommodating, and just kind. And so I'm not surprised when, in reading um, memories online, that there's, apart from these other constant claims, these common denominators that we have in memory of Diane, at the sheer amount of claims of mentorship. I suspect everyone on this call considers her a mentor, and there are hundreds, maybe thousands more that would lay the same claim. That's evidence, obviously, the breadth and depth of our admiration for Diane and her example. Um, and I don't know about anyone else. I mean, and how often this occurred, but certainly in my interchanges with Diane, the experience was, what wasn't necessarily often, not that you would expect it to be, but when you received, or I should say, when I received, or when one receives an endorsement by Diane, a professional highlight, that you have imparted something or seen something that she may not have, or have been of any use whatsoever, and was given a compliment. I've quoted mine, and it reads, "Yes, Ian, I think you've convinced me." So I dined on that multiple times every day since then. This was said to me in this past July, and what a wonderful thing it is to receive a compliment, or what it was a wonderful thing to have received a compliment from Diane, in this otherwise, her arena, her battlefield. I will share that she loved receiving photos and videos of our kids' antics, especially our young boy, the mighty Arthur. It was a combination of Bam Bam and Dennis the Menace. And to hear Diane chuckle and laugh was another gift. Obviously, in this fight, we can use all the light and the laughter that we can take. And I know that we're, in as much as we're providing individual testimony here, for myself and certainly my wife, there were tears the morning we heard the unexpected news, and there have been tears since. And there hasn't been a day so far in which I haven't missed Diane, and certainly my wife hasn't missed Diane, and over and over and over. though I never got the chance to tell her. The heart repeats how much she meant to me, personally and professionally, but certainly personally, just how much we love her. And I remember the morning of, I guess as my mind works, and certainly as I understood it, the way Diane's could relate to movies, science fiction and fantasy and whatnot. My mind and my heart instantly went to the movie Gladiator. The morning I had heard the news, and it's that scene. Maybe some of you will recall where Juba, Maximus's one of Maximus's proteges, was looking at the in the silent arena, and picking up the sand the way Maximus had, and certainly thinking of his beloved general, with a sense that maybe some of his words, "What we do echoes in eternity," cringy as that might sound, but what he said just had an eternal resonance that again carries on in the work, because we in this job we certainly have, unlike other professions, we have nowhere to run but to confront death as a daily reality. And Juba said, "I will see you again, but not yet, not yet." And in the conversations that Diane and I had, she would always end the conversation with, "Catch you later, take care, catch you later." And in this sense, certainly, I, though not yet, and not for a very, very long time, um, I'll take those words of great value and continue to um, engage in memory and an example in a way that I hope honors Diane. Um, into this, certainly her memory, but I think into the constant and moving testament that this issue and this fight is. Um, and it's not merely coincidental, I suppose, that when I thought of Diane, it was with a sense of not unlike Maximus, where he would say prior to the battle, "At my signal, unleash hell," which is not so dissimilar from Diane's. Maybe take it as a continued motto that we mourn for the living, we mourn the dead, but we fight like hell for the living. And so I'll leave it at that, and just reiterate how much every day I miss her, and how much we love her. And thank you very much for listening, and for all of your wonderful words of memory and encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Something that you said that Maria Town kind of reiterated in the chat is that one of her greatest gifts that she shared to all of us, that she was deeply, deeply kind. Diane and I were both adopted. And as an adoptee, you kind of have this recognition that none of the people in your life are actually your blood relations. You see all these other people that have that, but you have a unique, and she had a enormous capacity to see each person as though they were her family, and to treat each one like a brother and a sister. I certainly experienced that myself. So, Ann Summers McIntosh, I see you with us, so you have the floor.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, Ann Summers McIntosh. I'm a middle-aged white woman with dark blonde hair, wearing a cream-colored shirt today, and brown and clear eyeglasses. I'm on leave from my day job to participate here today, and forgive me, but I have to say that I'm making my comments in my personal capacity. I don't lay claim to knowing Diane as well as many others did, who've spoken before me today. I was only physically with her less than half a dozen times in the 22 years I knew her. I certainly didn't know Diane the best or the longest, but I had a sweet friendship with her, and I miss her terribly. We shared a love of Star Trek and sci-fi, which began when I may have confessed that I had a life-size Captain Kirk in my room at home. I think that made it a safe space for her to confess her sci-fi affections as well. And on another personal note that Ian just mentioned, Diane was one of my warmest, most caring supporters outside of family when I was pregnant with and had my kids and made the transition into parenthood. I loved to make her laugh with snotty commentary about one thing or another. And as you all know, Diane had such a great laugh. I'm still amazed to say that Diane became my friend since I began as and was forever her student. And it's always special when a teacher and a student later become friends. Diane chose to become my teacher, not that I gave her much of a choice. After I cold called her during the summer after my first year of law school, I was working at AAPD at the time. And it was more than 20 years ago. And I blathered on to her about how much I admired NDY and had discovered her when writing about health ethics in law school. And I asked if she'd be my mentor. And as I've been unsurprised in learning in the last 3 weeks, she became a great many other people's teachers in a way that wasn't so dissimilar from mine. I was Diane Coleman's fangirl way before I counted her as a friend, and I will always be a Diane Coleman fangirl. When I discovered what a futility law was during law school around 2001, I could hardly believe they existed, those laws, because they were so sinister. And I asked Diane if she knew about it, what they were, half hoping that I had discovered something that would impress my newly established mentor. What a joke. But of course she knew what futility laws were, but she was so gracious about it. She said, yes, I know all about them. And yes, she agreed they were positively horrifying in their implications for people with disabilities. Something like, have Westlaw access, we'll fight, was my dorky response to her at the time. And I quickly got to work doing a 50-state analysis and sent it to her right away. I was all in on those topics and figured everyone else was in the disability community if they understood them because they were so scary and they were truly an existential threat, as we would all later find out during COVID. The thought that a doctor could impose his or her judgment of when a treatment was futile for a patient, which of course is way too often intertwined with how a doctor views the patient themselves, and then just withdraw the treatment, is just terrifying. So I remember asking her who in the disability community is on the forefront of this fight against these laws, aside from Not Dead Yet, and against assisted suicide. And I'm sure Diane didn't want to utterly crush my enthusiasm when she responded. So she was tempered, calm, but always direct, which was hallmark Diane: tempered, calm, always direct. And I remember her saying something, well, you know, we have a lot of groups with us, but this isn't their primary concern. They're working on a lot of other issues ahead of this one. And that was the answer over and over for a while, as I learned more about the issues, the community, and the thinner than thin resources and bandwidth of so many advocates with fingers in so many dams, holding back so many impending disasters. Not Dead Yet's bread and butter areas weren't and aren't really anyone else's primary concern. And yet it seemed with nearly uniform acquiescence, everyone recognized Not Dead Yet's focus areas were extreme threats to the lives of people with disabilities. And they therefore knew and revered Diane and Not Dead Yet with a certain mythos, not unlike a dragon slayer at the kingdom's outer wall. And she was. Diane was a dragon slayer. She delivered death blow upon death blow in any testimony, op-ed, or other communication she ever delivered by utterly decimating the other side's arguments with facts and reason. And she was polite, but she had fierce grit. And as so many others have given witness to this afternoon, Diane's Not Dead Yet focus wasn't her first, second, or even 17th rodeo. You know, her demeanor, her forcefulness, and her effectiveness came out of that seasoned advocacy across so many different areas. And even still, after my initial years of naivete gave way to greater pragmatics and gallows humor, which was fun to develop, bit of cynicism, I still bore my wonderment, and I still do, that advocates and organizations aren't more all in on Not Dead Yet's issues. And I talked to Diane about it more than just a few times, and often interlaced with talks of Not Dead Yet's future, particularly during my very happy days as Not Dead Yet's board chair. And a lot of it is politics of people's boards, Diane would explain to me. If some of these nonprofits have even one outspoken board member who's pro-assisted suicide, they often feel constrained to remain silent or not get involved. And for others, they just feel like they can't take on one more thing. Not right now. They just can't do it at the affiliate or the chapter level where these state laws are cropping up. Yet, yes, it is disappointing. She would agree with me, I remember. And yes, it's still disappointing. I would often tell Diane, we have to just convince them. Maybe if we present it to them again, so they really get it. It's too important. Everybody has to care. These state bills are just one legislative session away from breaching the wall. She would agree, but she would acknowledge her own bandwidth limitations, which of course was entirely fair. Diane Coleman stood in the gap. Diane Coleman stood in the gap. What limited state data we do have from assisted suicide experiences in the US confirm that people with non-terminal disabilities are given assisted suicide every year because of their disabilities. People with diabetes, people with hernias, people with rheumatoid arthritis, people who are anorexic. It's right there in official state documents. They were all deemed eligible, no questions asked. They were eligible because of their disabilities, and that's what a doctor decided. And they all received assisted suicide. They were assisted to die because of their disabilities, and they weren't assisted to live. What more flagrant disability discrimination could there be? Nobody understood this like Diane, and nobody could say it like she did. As my Canadian husband, Ian, who just spoke, has been saying to anyone who will listen, and as Diane and Not Dead Yet know all too well, just north of us in Canada, assisted suicide, which was legalized there under the same garbage representations that proponents peddle here, those lies of limited eligibility, narrowly construed bills, that things are always up to personal choice. It's now burgeoned in Canada into this harrowing death toll with story after story from disabled Canadian brothers and sisters who've been warning us. It's come for us now. They're telling us, they're offering it to us, and they're recommending it to us when they haven't helped us live. Disabled people in Canada are begging for critical services and supports, and they're being offered assisted suicide instead. Housing insecure disabled people in Canada are being offered assisted suicide instead. Story after story across the country, and not a peep of outrage or concern from proponents of assisted suicide here in the US, who keep smiling while they claim in state house after state house that assisted suicide has nothing to do with disabled people, because it's not for us. It's only for the terminally ill, they say. No records of abuse, they say. Those disabled people are sincere, but they're misinformed, they say. But not a peep of concern as the Canadian model expands and has started truly threatening its disabled citizenry. Haven't been able to get help to live, but would you like to have some help to die? Diane stood in that gap. We're all tired, so tired. We're all busy, so very busy, but we have to hang on a little longer. We have to find a little more time to give. It's just too important. It's too dangerous, and it's coming for us. Diane stood in the gap and invited anyone who wanted to stand in the gap with her to do so. Even now, through her legacy, she calls each one of us to stand in the gap with her. I believe we honor Diane the most by deciding to find the time, by holding on, tired as we are, a bit longer for this one more thing, because as Diane knew so well, it's that important. By deciding to get more educated on the issues, and by making spaces at our community's respective organizations to have our boards and staff learn more about them. Please reach out to Not Dead Yet and get engaged, please. And if you already are engaged, get someone else engaged. Remember Diane. Remember how tirelessly she stood in the gap and fought for all of us. Pick up the fight with me. Stand in the gap. Engage those who are pursuing the policies that threaten our very lives. Take the fight to the state houses. Show them we're never going to make this easy for them. Show them, like our beloved Diane Coleman's legacy, that we are not dead yet. Rest in peace and power, Diane. I love you, my dear friend.
Thank you, Ann. It's just so true. You know, I in the last few years, Diane and I worked together to launch this litigation strategy. Our organizations and some others, California Independent Living Center, United Spinal, worked together to sue the state of California to test Diane's longstanding theory that assisted suicide laws violate the ADA. And I can't tell you the dozens of calls that I've been on with her where we needed to educate some particular group about this. And after Marilyn Golden died, now Diane, we're going to need people to step up. Jules, good. I know that you also wanted to say a few things.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, running tech and trying to talk at the same time. Hi, for those of you I don't know, my name is Jules Good. I had the honor of formerly being the assistant director at Not Dead Yet for a brief time. I'm a white person with short pink hair, wearing big glasses and a flannel shirt. I had the honor and privilege of working under Diane's leadership for about 2 years. And while my time with her was brief, it was extremely impactful. When I was just starting out in the disability policy world, I heard whispers of Diane's name and work everywhere. As someone with disabilities who felt like I would never be valued anywhere, her message that disabled people are as worthy and as precious as anyone else saved me. Like many of us, I learned most of what I know about assisted suicide and medical discrimination against disabled people from her. She was, in a word, as so many of us have said, brilliant. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of relevant court cases, articles, and stories about assisted suicide and so many other disability issues, and she was passionate about passing on that knowledge. She was endlessly patient with my obvious questions, late timesheets, and silly mistakes. One of my favorite emails from her had the subject line, "Oh, Kelly, .. with John Kelly's last name spelled correctly. And the body of the email just read, "Was misspelled Kelly." I spelled it wrong in something that I sent to her. Winky face. She was so cheeky. Decades of pleading our community's basic humanity would make most people bitter and coarse, but not Diane. She had a whip-smart sense of humor and a huge heart. She reminded me to take care of myself when the work got tough, and I often wished that she would extend more of that grace to herself. She loved telling me stories about her music, her time road tripping across the US as a young woman, and the fun that she had with her sisters whenever they would visit. When she couldn't sleep, she would email me random anecdotes about people we both knew, interesting news articles, and stuff she forgot to tell me during the day. I referred to it as the Diane download, and I'd give anything to get another one, as I know many of us would. Because I never got to meet Diane in person, it's hard to process that she's really gone. I still get the urge to text her a question about strategy for the upcoming legislative session or forward her an email to solicit her witty response on current events, and then I remember that I can't. But I know that whenever I share something she taught me, I can still connect with her in a way. She's a root in my advocacy lineage, and I'm a branch that grew from her, and the twigs that sprout from me will carry a piece of her too. I'm grateful to be in community with you all and to share this time to celebrate Diane's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. I now understand that we just have a couple minutes left before we play our closing song. I thought that Carol Marfisi had asked to speak, so maybe Carol, if you're still with us. Jules, do you... Oh, wonderful.
Oh, I will never forget meeting Diane because he said something to me that was so very precious. She said to me, "Don't worry, I have all the time in the world. Tell me what you want and what." Her saying that made me relax, and we had a good, robust conversation. I tell people about not dead yet and about Diane. And as you all know, there are people all over, Republican, Democrat, whatever, and they have their own opinion about life. And what I'm gonna say is I can't change anybody's opinion. I have a severe physical disability. And I remember when I was earning my, my master's degree, somebody in my group said to me, Carol, what is it that makes you want to go on living? And I was so shocked that I didn't know what to say. So I said, why wouldn't I want to live? I have so much to live for and so much to do for my community and for the world. And they said, I don't know if I could have your bravery and courage. And I said, when you are disabled, it comes right along with being disabled. I don't consider myself brave or courageous. I just consider myself being careful, and I learned a lot from Diane about not letting people affect what you feel. We live in a country where we are always um talking about it's my body, it's my choice. Yes, it is your body, your choice. But the thing goes for people with disability. It's my body and my choice. And if I want to live till the moment I take my last breath, Diane, I will live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. So I think we'll close at this point since we're at time, and I know we're gonna close with a song that is sung by Diane. It's called Pride. Thank you all so much for coming and for joining us for this good moment to be together and remember her memory and carry it on through her work.
And this is Jules. Unfortunately, the transcript for that song did not pan out. So I'm going to play the same song that we played while we were coming in, and I will share the corrected transcript of Pride with folks later. Sorry about that.
Something unforeseen is going on. We the so-called weak are getting strong and crying out for what we know is right. Accused because we have the guts to fight. Years of neglect in dark and hidden rooms, our siblings of the past were sealed away in tombs. Free our brothers, free our sisters too, free our people now. It's what you gotta do. Free our parents, free our children too. Free our people now. It's up to all of you. Prisoners of profit and of greed, rationed out their basic human needs, overlooked because of fear and shame, tossed back and forth in ignorance and blame. The industry of care has empty graves to fill. How many gifted people are caged against their will? Free our brothers, free our sisters too. Free our people now. It's what you've got to do. Free our parents, free our children too. Free our people now. It's up to all of you.
Thanks very much, everyone, for coming, and that concludes the virtual memorial for Diane Coleman. May she rest in peace and in power.
Thank you, Matt.